Don Lemon breaking the Ku Klux Klan Act on Martin Luther King Day. That's what we'll be covering today on The Legal Mindset. We teach you to be your own judge. I'm Andrew Esquire, American attorney, and this is a fast facts video, the quick and dirty version of the latest in legal news. So let's get right into the PowerPoint here, the PP. We got Don Lemon violating the KKK Act. In case you don't know who Don Lemon is, the defendant in this case, as we present it, he is a former newscaster. He worked at CNN and NBC, but he was fired by CNN in 2023. He led a group of anti-ICE protesters into an active church worship service on Martin Luther King Day.
This is an operation that is secret.
This is Operation Pull Up, more of a clandestine operation. We show up somewhere. They don't expect us to come there, and then we disrupt business as usual.
Disrupting the worship service, traumatizing elderly children and all the parishioners there in the name of this anti-ICE protest. So let's look into the plaintiff. The plaintiff is Harmy Dillon. That is in the DOJ. That is, of course, the U.S. federal government that has said that they are looking to take action on this, specifically to prevent further copycat instances in places of worship all around the United States being disrupted by protesters freely. So what is the background here? Well, let's get to our opening statements. The Ku Klux Klan Act is AKA the Civil Rights Act of 1871. That's just another name for the Civil Rights Act of 1871. And the big thing that applies here is the prohibition on conspiracies, specifically conspiracies that deprive anyone, meaning individuals, of constitutional rights such as voting, assembly, or worship. Worship being the freedom to go to your place of worship, whether that is a church, a synagogue, a mosque, whatever, and be able to worship freely without having that right impinged upon by others. Now, this is a very serious act, and it can impose monetary and criminal penalties up to 10 years in prison. So there is some significant time potentially faced by Don Lemon and the others that may be convicted under this act. Now, the irony here, of course, this had happened on Martin Luther King Day, and this very act has been used multiple times in the past to stop people such as white supremacists, the Ku Klux Klan, from violating people's rights during Reconstruction. That was something that happened very, very, very often. However, in this case, it's going to be applied a little bit differently according to the arguments of the state. The state is alleging that Don Lemon participated in a criminal conspiracy because he knew the plan to enter the church and disrupt the worship service. It's very key here that you know it's a conspiracy beforehand. So this is all going to turn on, and the argument of the state relies upon knowledge that they were going to disrupt that service and enter the church. This violates the Christian parishioners' right to worship, to have a freedom of worship that is unimpinged by anybody else, that nobody else is going to come in and violate that or stop them from worshiping freely. And this is something that the Ku Klux Klan used in very similar fashion during Reconstruction. Now, the argument of the defense will be that, they were more violent, and that's something that's up to the judge to consider. But really, it's not part of the key element here, which is knowledge. If you knew this was going to happen, then you might be part of that conspiracy. Also, interestingly, under the FACE Act, blocking access to places of worship is also illegal. This is actually a part of case law that came out of blocking access to abortion clinics, but it equally applies to places of worship, etc. So they might also be liable under this act as well, not just the KKK Act, the FACE Act. Now, in Don Lemon's defense, so Don Lemon will argue that, hey, I was just conducting journalism. And this is going to have a chilling effect, meaning it's going to discourage journalists in the United States from conducting journalism. He'd also argue that the KKK Act really hasn't been applied to journalism before, not in the same way, and certainly not to a individual such as Don Lemon on Martin Luther King Day. However, that would not stop it necessarily from being applied. It would just be the first application to a journalist in this instance. Lemon said he wasn't protesting, and he said he was just conducting journalism alone. And when they asked him to leave, he says that that's the moment in which he left. So that's his argument. Hey, when they asked me to leave, I left. Because remember, guys, this is private property. Churches are private property. They are not the public commons. They're not a place where everybody can assemble and do whatever they want. They are private property. They can trespass you. And when they tell you to leave a church, mosque, synagogue, whatever, you have to leave, as that is private property of that particular parish. Lemon can argue the protest was nonviolent, and I think that's more of a mitigating factor in terms of bringing down the penalty or the civil amount he'd have to pay in actual dollars. I think that's more mitigating, but it doesn't completely take away the conspiracy element. Now, in some of the kind of the wrapping up, looking at some of the other case law on this, whether he would be protected or not protected. The thing is, guys, journalism and guys and gals, journalism is not a complete shield. It's not complete immunity. For example, there have been cases such as blocking access to abortion clinics where journalists were indeed held to be part of that and they were held liable. So there's cases in which journalists and journalism is not going to allow you to fully escape criminal punishment. Also, if there are any communications, if there's anything between the protest organizers, the people that were in charge of that protest, the anti-ICE protest, that would hurt Lemon. Also, think about the fact pattern here. Targeting a predominantly white church and labeling the parishioners as quote unquote white supremacists supports a hate crime angle. It does not matter that they are white, whether you're white, black, brown, whatever, it does not matter. It is based on your race, right? That is something that is supporting a hate crime angle, race, nationality, origin, that would all play in here. So this absolutely would reinforce the angle of the KKK Act. Now, there are possibilities of additional charges coming, such as child endangerment or elder abuse, child abuse as well. So that might be something that comes down the line when we see this going down the pike. Now, those could give up to 10 years in prison, whether it's child endangerment or elder abuse. Now, for the judgment, this is a great test case for the application of the KKK Act, and a thorough investigation should indeed be held. I do believe that this should be investigated very, very thoroughly, and that they should look into this very, 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 very closely. We need to get all the emails, texts, and communications between Don Lemon and the protest organizers and others involved in that to show how much did Don Lemon actually know. If Don Lemon knew that they were going to disrupt this service, then he is certainly hooked in on this conspiracy. And if this act is inapplicable, other charges should be investigated, whether that is child endangerment or elder abuse, whatever. Both of those parties, younger people, we have pictures of children crying, and elderly people were impacted by this. And those are vulnerable groups. Violation of freedom of worship would be equally intolerable if it was conducted against non-white parishioners. So in my book, if this happened to a situation with a mosque or a synagogue, and this was a bunch of white people coming in or whatever, or if this was a bunch of Latinos coming in, it doesn't matter. It would not change the analysis here. And I think this is something we need to stop very, very harshly before there are indeed other copycats across the United States. But I want to know what you guys think in the comments below, and I'll catch you on the next.